Then my one meal a day was brought to me at around noon. Now this meal consisted primarily of grains. It was called kejri, which is a combination of rice and dal, which is like a lentil. And now and then there was sabji, or a vegetable, and a chapati, which is made of whole wheat flour and water. So that was it. That was my food for the day. Right. Now, the way you work in doing sadhana is that every act you perform becomes a method of taking you to this other state of consciousness. You're trying to change your vantage point, your perceptual vantage point, and everything you do has got to be a device to help you get to that place. From a Western point of view, you're doing a complete cognitive reorganization. You're changing your reference point. You're changing the core concept around which the whole constellation of thought is built. And therefore, you have to take every act and redefine it and develop new habits of thought for thinking about it. So, I'll give you an example. You take a piece of food like this. You're offered food. Now, in the old days, you'd sit down, and sometimes when you got into these particularly phony families, they'd say grace. And it was like, all right, come on already. And at great functions, they'd say long graces, Rabbis would get up and go on for long periods of time and so on, and they'd bless Lyndon Johnson in the Vietnam War, and, they do the whole trip, right? Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagni, Brahmanahota, Brahmaitan, Gantabhyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat, Param Brahma Tasmai, Shri Guru Venamaha, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Translation? First thing is, this ritual that I am going through now is Brahma. In other words, now I got to stop for a moment, for those of you that are new in this game, to explain the meaning of Brahma. Here is the gross universe. Your bodies, this table, this microphone, it's all gross, coming through your senses, right? Gross energy. Slowed down, way slowed down. Mass energy, you all understand that, so we can go through that quickly. Then you get to finer energies like thought. That's just energy slowed down less. It's faster, finer. Faster and finer. Light is such an energy. Keep going finer and finer and finer until you get to the unit of energy which is so fine, or the unit of stuff, you can call it, that is so fine that it's interchangeable in everything in the universe. It's what the air is made up of, it's what light's made up of, it's what thought's made up of, it's what gross things are made up of, right? That all is still form. It's still in the form of energy. It's just very fine energy. It's called Prakriti in the particular system, the Hindu system. This particular Patanjali system. Prakriti is the finest level of form, the converse side of which is the formless. That is the Akash, or that place where it all is behind form. Now, if you just think of this as a set of levels, hypothetically for the moment, if you haven't experienced these, and if you've watched it all happen, it's one thing, but if not, theoretically, you go through these levels. So you go gross, finer, 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 to the finest type of stuff, and then all of that is contained within and is the opposite side of and is in continuous cycle of emerging and disappearing with that which is formless, which is behind it. That which is formless, which is behind it, which contains all, is what's called Brahma. It's called the Akash, it's called Purusha, it's got lots and lots of names to it. And that place which is behind is stable, it's always the same, it's never changing, and all the stuff when it comes down into form, when the Prakriti starts to work and creates manifestations, that's all sort of like illusion. It's just happening and all going back into this place, which always is, and all of this is it in a solid form. Solid nothingness, or fullness, however you want to play it. Doesn't mean empty, as you can understand, because it's everything. It's everything and nothing. It's all and everything. It's the clear white light. It's the, right? Except it's beyond that. It's beyond any polarities, any labels, it's not white because it's not dark, it's not anything. It's everything. All right, that's Brahma, right? So everything you see, now you go back to the apple, and what have we got is the statement, the ritual I am going through is part of Brahma. You see, my thought about doing this thing is part of Brahma. The offering, meaning the apple, is Brahma. He who is making the offering, meaning me, I'm part of Brahma. The fire to which the fire that's consuming the offering, meaning my hunger, that's also Brahma. And he to whom I'm making the offering, that's also Brahma. I mean, in other words, if I can conceive of any finite form, which I'll call God, see, keep in mind, that's just another manifestation of Brahma. Right? One level down, it's in form. It's finite. Then the last line of that is, he who keeps in mind that all is Brahma goes to Brahma, becomes enlightened, in other words. And then the next part of it is, you offer it, you reverence it, and you offer it to Brahma, which is not that Brahma, it's Brahma then manifested initially in the Hindu pantheon in 3 manifestations. There were 3 initial manifestations. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma is the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. Right? And so you offer it to each of these 3 initial manifestations called the Godheads, the Godhead. Now, you see how eating, now let's see what happens after you've done all that, and then you start to eat. Because this is the game I got caught in. You see, I didn't mind giving up sex, because after all, you're sitting in India anyway, where you don't hardly ever see the women, because they're all hiding behind doors anyway. And it was all right. It was an interesting thing to be doing while I was in India, giving up sex. And I didn't mind being cold, and I didn't mind all the other things, but I'm a very oral guy. See, who I was would say I am a very oral guy. Coming out of a good Jewish family where food and love and all that were all chicken soup, right? And therefore, I didn't mind all the rest of the austerities, but when that food came, it could have been swill from the bucket. And it was the food that I was given, and it was steak from Original Joe's, and it was lobster Savannah from Loch Ober's, and it was every possible delicacy. I mean, it was just rice and dal, but as far as I was concerned, I ate it with the same, getting completely lost in the joy of eating, right? The delicacy of the flavor and the joy of swallowing, the whole thing, right? And I'd savor and overload and just eat and eat everything that was available, And I kept thinking to myself, I'm not going to give this up. Nobody's pushing you. Who you fighting against? So finally, I thought, here's what happened. Every Tuesday you don't eat. See, it's Mangalam Day. You fast for a day. So, okay, I can fast for a day. I used to do it on Yom Kippur all the time. But the difference was in Yom Kippur, around the middle of the afternoon, you start to have fantasies about all the food you're going to eat when the fast is passed, you see. And now, these people don't fast like, it doesn't matter whether they eat or don't eat, right? You're in a different environment. You're not sitting in the temple with everybody saying, are you going home to cook the... Okay. Then, one day, I fasted on Mangalam Day, and the next day, the guy that usually cooks, the sadhu that usually cooks the food, had a bad tooth, and he went somewhere, or something happened, I don't know, and there was no food. So I was being very game about the whole thing, and I just, well, listen, I'm a sadhu, what's, food, I'll just ignore it. So I didn't eat that day. Next day the teacher came and I said, well, I didn't eat for 2 days. It's like, what happens is, see, the very subtle way your ego works is you no sooner finish some little accomplishment on your sadhana, on your spiritual path, and the ego walks behind you and pats you in the back. It's pretty good. That's the way it sort of sneaks back in to take over again. So I said to the guru, the teacher, well, I didn't eat yesterday either. 2 days I didn't eat. He says, well, if it doesn't disturb you, he said, it is good on the full moon every 3 months to go for 9 days. Well, now. Right. That's not 9 days without liquid. You do take liquid, right? Just don't take any solid. He says it's good for your intestine. Well, all right, by gosh, I'll do it, right? Well, you get a little weak around the 4th day, and my fantasies are, I'd lie on my mat. It's not in bed, you're on a mat, see? And I lie on my mat, and I would think about Thanksgiving. And I'd think about the squash with the marshmallows on it. And all the things I'd never have again, see? And I was so full of self-pity. And I'd recite the whole thing, and I'd be out raking leaves in my head, and I'd smell the turkey cooking, and then I'd go in and I'd see the pumpkin pies, and oh boy, I just created the whole thing, and I spent 9 days just locked in oral fantasies of the most extraordinary nature, right? Which, since I hadn't given up a desire or attachment, the act of fasting had no spiritual value particularly at all, except it showed me where I wasn't. Well, by the second round, I had changed. The second 3-month time, when that came up. So this time, it was very interesting. My fantasies now weren't about turkey or lobster or any of the things I'd never have again. Now they were about spinach and big piles of brown rice. All the things I could eat again. I just had limited my fantasy life now to what was going to be available to me. But I was still having these fantasies, and I was still very locked in food, and it lasted much through the winter. And then I remember what happened. I tried every device. I tried the Southern Buddhist meditation, which is like a cemetery meditation, where you look at your bags of intestines, and you look at the food as, worm-ridden and all that, and you're eating it, and it certainly didn't make it a groove, but I still ate with great relish, It's all right, worms, some people eat ants. And I couldn't quite break out. And it was, no matter what I did, when the food came, it was just like I was a ravenous animal. It had nothing to do with being a holy man. And I tried very hard all the methods I knew of not being attached to the food, but I couldn't work it. And then I started to do a meditation, which is created by Ramana Maharshi, called Vichara Atma.